The temperature didn't fall so much as it collapsed, dropping through numbers most people only saw in textbooks or survival documentaries, the kind of cold that turns breath into shards and makes engines whine like wounded animals before giving up entirely. And on Tom Calder's ranch, the wind came screaming across the open land with nothing to stop it, flattening grass frozen into needles and driving snow sideways so hard it erased the horizon. Yet Tom stood there anyway, hunched in layers that no longer felt thick enough, staring at the maze he had spent weeks carving into the snow, knowing this night would decide whether he was a stubborn fool or a man who understood something others didn't. Years ago, before grief hollowed him out, he had learned that cattle don't fear cold the way humans do. They fear exposure and chaos, the way wind steals heat faster than flesh can make it, the way panic scatters warmth instead of conserving it. And that lesson had come at a cost he never spoke. About the winter a sudden storm caught his herd in the open and he lost dozens before morning. The winter that taught him that straight lines invite wind and wide spaces invite terror. And so he began experimenting, packing snow into tall, curving walls that bent and folded like a river frozen mid-flow, creating paths that forced the animals to move slowly, turn often, and stay close, letting their own bodies form a living furnace. The first year, neighbors laughed and shook their heads as they passed by, calling it a stupid snow maze, saying he was wasting time on something that would collapse or drift shut. But Tom rebuilt it every winter, refining angles, learning how snow behaved under pressure, how wind searched for shortcuts and how curves denied it any. And now, as the cold deepened, toward -70 and radios, crackled with warnings that sounded more like farewells, Tom swung open the gate and felt his stomach knot as 400 head hesitated, nostrils flaring, eyes rolling white at the roar of the storm, and for a heartbeat he wondered if he had misjudged everything, if panic would take them and prove the critics right. But then the lead cows stepped forward, drawn by instinct into the winding corridor, their hooves crunching rhythmically, bodies brushing close enough to share warmth, steam rising in thick clouds that hung low and trapped heat. And as more followed, the maze came alive, a slow, pulsing organism of muscle and breath, the walls breaking the wind into whispers instead of screams, the constant movement preventing frost from settling deep into flesh, while Tom walked the perimeter with numb fingers and burning lungs, reinforcing weak points where drifts threatened to breach, his mind drifting back to the night his wife never came home, the night the sheriff's lights painted the snow red and blue, and how he had learned then that nature doesn't care about intention, only preparation. Hours passed, measured not by time but by pain, by the way his boots stiffened and his beard turned to ice. And somewhere beyond the maze the world felt empty and hostile, yet inside it there was order, a strange calm born of motion and design, and Tom realized that survival often looks unimpressive until the moment it's needed most, that ideas dismissed in comfort can become lifelines in crisis. And as the storm peaked and the cold settled like a weight on the land, he trusted the maze, trusted the animals, and trusted the hard-earned knowledge that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stop fighting nature head-on and learn how to bend with it. Because in nights like this, pride freezes first and only humility lasts until morning. Morning arrived slowly, not with warmth or color, but with a thin, gray light that seemed unsure whether it belonged to the land at all. And Tom Calder woke where he had collapsed against the lee side of a drift, his body aching as if it had been hammered into the frozen ground, the storm having finally burned itself out sometime before dawn, leaving behind a silence so deep it rang in his ears. And for a long moment he didn't move, afraid that the quiet meant what he had feared all night, that beyond the maze lay loss too heavy to count. But then he heard it, breathing, steady and alive, a low chorus rising from within the snow walls, and when he forced himself upright and stepped inside, the sight nearly broke him, because all 400 head were still there, packed together like a living wall, hides rimed with frost but eyes clear, legs steady, heat rolling off them in waves that melted the inner edges of the maze into smooth, glazed curves, proof that the system had held when everything else would have failed. He moved among them slowly, touching necks and flanks, feeling warmth where he expected cold, murmuring to animals that didn't know they had just survived something people would talk about for decades. And outside the maze the land looked dead, fences buried, equipment frozen solid, even the air seeming brittle. And as word spread by the first radios that crackled back to life, trucks began appearing on the distant road, neighbors who had written the night off as a loss arriving with hollow, faces and low expectations, only to stop short at the sight of the maze and the living mass inside it, their disbelief giving way to questions, then quiet understanding as Tom explained, not like a salesman or a hero, but like a man tired of being misunderstood, telling them how wind was the real killer, how straight shelter creates pressure points and panic, how snow shaped right insulates better than steel, and how movement generates heat that no heater can replace when power dies. Experts came later, cameras and notebooks in hand, but Tom paid them little mind, because what mattered was watching. Men who had laughed at him begin sketching curves in the snow with their boots, seeing pride loosen its grip in the face of undeniable truth. And as the days passed and the story spread beyond the county, people called it innovation, genius, even a miracle, but Tom knew better, knowing it was simply respect, for animals, for land, for lessons learned the hardest way. And when spring finally arrived, slow and muddy, revealing grass flattened but alive beneath the drifts, the maze melted back into nothing, leaving no monument but memory, yet its impact remained, in herds saved across the region, in methods quietly copied and improved, and in Tom himself, who found a strange peace knowing that out of grief had come something that spared others the same pain. And if this story of quiet resilience, misunderstood ideas, and survival against impossible odds reached you, then staying with this channel, subscribing and sharing these stories, helps ensure that the lessons forged in the cold don't disappear with the thaw, because the world needs reminders that the most powerful solutions often come from listening instead of boasting, from patience instead of force, and from people willing to stand alone long enough for the truth to reveal itself.